Welcome. I'm your host, Dustin. Dean's not able to make it today, but that's okay because we have a special guest today, Brett Parker, who is the main, I would say you're pretty much the main host over on Dissect That Film, but you have other people that that work with you on the show as well, but you're pretty much the face of it. So it's awesome to have you on, Brett, to talk about Child's Play. And I want you to kind of, talk to our listeners and let them know where they can find you. If there's anything that you're doing right now that you want to promote. So I'm going to give you the floor for a little bit and you can have at it, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm a huge fan of the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, I am Brett Parker. I am the host of Dissect That Film, where me and my wonderful co-host Dan and Angela of DNA Gaming, we sit down and talk about movies. We dissect as our intro is, we dissect your favorite films, film franchises, and TV. It's something I started when we first changed our name, and it just kind of stuck, even though there's some movies that probably aren't going to be your favorite. Uh, but yeah, we just sit down. I say we're called Dissect That Film, but it's as minimal dissection as you can get. We kind of break down the plots of movies. We try to incorporate some comedy into it, even with the serious stuff. And yeah, it's just about sitting down, having a good time talking about movies, which is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I finally just said, "Let's do it."
Yeah, and your
But
show is great. Like I was saying even before we started, like I love your show. I listen to it as much as I possibly can. And I think the last one you just put out was the Terminator Genesis,
yeah,
which I'm kind of like half and half of that film. Like I like it, but I also don't. Um, so I think everything that you guys were talking about throughout that whole episode really, kind of sums up what that movie is. And you guys did it a lot with a lot of movies. Like you did all of the Friday the 13th movies in one episode, which was nuts. It's like I
that
can't
one
believe they
was.
did that, but
Woo!
you guys did it, and that was awesome as well.
I, I pitched that, and I didn't fully comprehend how much it was going to take, but I feel it came out really well.
Oh, it did. It
That
definitely
was
did.
one where I was like, "Whoo, we got to talk about 11 movies here. This is going to be a long one," but I think we did pretty good on that one.
Oh yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, it this is it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. Talk about movies. I mean, I've been, just, sitting down talking to, people in my family or my friends about movies. I don't really have a lot of people I can really talk to that way. My brother was the one who started the show with me, and he's the one that what I'd always have those conversations with. And so that's why we started the show. And he had to step away from the show back in September. So I brought Dan and Angela on, who were actually they had guests on the show probably more times than certain people were actually the hosts of the show.
Mhm.
So it was easy to bring them in, and we changed the name, of course. And yeah, it's been a wild year and a half. It's definitely the longest like side project I've ever been a part of. And I don't see it ending anytime soon. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah, and that's like how I think like my show's going as well. It started out as just like a fun little project, but then it just evolves into something that you may not be completely like prepared for, but you're also like, this is awesome. Like
Yeah.
I'm so happy that I'm able to do something like this. Yeah, it's not paying the bills or anything like that. It's not we're gonna make a lot of money off this, but it's fun to just sit and talk about your favorite things. Like mainly a horror podcast over here. I know that you cover a wide range of everything, so I really do highly recommend anybody who listens to our show to please go check out Dissect That Film because you did do amazing work over there, and I'm always coming out of all the episodes laughing or smile on my face or change of mind on certain films too, which happens with some other podcasts that I listen to as well. So you never know what you're going to be getting into when you listen to other people's shows, and there's a lot of them out there. So to be able to stick out in any kind of way is always a really cool feeling, and I feel like that you and your crew over there definitely stick out um, amongst all the other shows that I listen to because I've had to unfortunately like boil down to only a few shows I listen to It's about 10, and you guys are definitely in that 10. So it's awesome to have you on here too.
That is that's always amazing to hear, to have somebody say that. It really makes it all worth it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And knowing that you listen to our show as well, this means that our family in the podcast community it's just growing so big. Like, yeah, I may not be able to listen to a lot of podcasts out there, but I do support everybody anyway. Because there's only
Mhm.
so much time in a day and so much you can listen to or do. And it sucks. I wish there was an unlimited amount of time, or we didn't have to sleep or anything, so we could, catch up on the things that we really want to catch up on.
Yeah.
Um, it's a bit rough, but when you can sit down and enjoy a show that's like an hour to 2 hours. I think our longest episode we've had is probably 2 hours and 45 minutes here on this show, and that's a lot. That
Yeah. We've,
that's
we've done that. We've done that a couple times. Back in the before we were Dissect That Film, we went by the Parker Chronicles because it was me and my brother who started it. And I never edited the show. So it was and we live streamed it on Twitch. So
been there, done that.
it was when I started streaming to the end of the stream, and then I would just release it. And for actually we started in about April of 2021, and we didn't release our first episode like for people to listen to on podcast services until I think almost the end of May.
Okay.
So it was pretty much like either you were at the live stream or you didn't hear the episode. So there was like 1 week in May where I released like the first 6 or 7 episodes of the show. And one of them was our Godzilla King of the Monsters episode, which was
Oh yeah.
over 3 hours long because we had our now co-host Dan, and then we had another guy on the show who was a huge Godzilla fan, and they just kind of geeked out the whole time, and I just let him go, and it went really long. So I try not to get it to that point anymore, but there are sometimes it's just I talk a lot, so um, sometimes I look down at the recording time, I'm like, oh no,
Yeah,
it's
I
like
do that too.
things I gotta edit.
I've been trying to be really good and keeping things from like 15 minutes to like an hour 20. I feel like that's a really good sweet spot right there because it's not too long, but
Right.
it's long enough for people to be like, wow, okay, they really did cover everything, especially for interviews. When it
Yeah.
comes to movie reviews, it's okay if it's a little bit longer because you're talking about a film and there's a
Right.
lot of things to go over. Like today, we're going to be talking about Child's Play, the 1988
Ah,
one. And then I cannot wait to really dive into this because it's definitely one of my favorite movies in the slasher verse, if you want to call it that. So it's awesome to have you on here. And I know you handpicked this one yourself throughout the whole list that
yeah.
I had, because there was a lot of movies on
Lot of
there.
great movies on that list, but when I see anything Child's Play related, I mean, we covered Child's Play on our show back in October. It was one of our extra spooky time episode for the end of October. It was, I think we actually released it around Halloween. But yeah, I love this movie so much. It's one of those things where I don't just love this movie, I love this entire franchise. Like, it's
Same.
one of my favorite slasher franchises. Like, I love Nightmare on Elm Street, I love Halloween, I love Scream, but this is like I just love this silly concept that they took from actually a I mean, we'll get into it, but like the doll that they based Chucky on, I had as a kid.
Oh,
So it was like
really?
it was a little bit broad, a little bit. I was just that weirdo. It was like kids are just like, nope, and I was just like, yeah, I'm all about this.
Yeah, it's nuts. And this is like you were saying, this is your favorite, essentially out of the slashers and stuff, and it is mine too. It always flip flops because Halloween's always it's going to be my number one forever. It's always going to be Halloween, the whole franchise. Even though it's a bit messy in parts, but I mean, this is a pretty
I mean,
messy
so
franchise as
so
well.
is Child's Play.
But yeah, it's always flip flopping between uh, Nightmare on Elm Street and this one for second place. There's just certain days or months where I feel, I don't know, like I'm being pulled towards this one more or the other one. But yeah, it's such a fun ride. Any of these slasher franchises that you want to, know, watch or dive into, they're all fun. They're all goofy. Um, they don't really take themselves too seriously, and when they do, they fall flat. Um,
Yeah.
and this is a franchise where they did try doing that, and it just turned into more of a comedic slasher more than anything. And there's definitely elements of that in the first one for sure, but they were going for more of a psychological, um, dark slasher with a little bit of comedy mixed in, just to kind of uh, tone it out a little bit. And Brad Dourif is just he's a god, man. Brad Dourif is great.
Only Chucky in my eyes.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess right now we can definitely start diving into this. I'll pull up the IMDb and we can run through some of the people that were in this film. There's actually quite a bit. You don't really think about it, but there is, and I'm not going to stick to like the main people, because there's a lot. But for everybody who doesn't know, we have Catherine Hicks, who played Karen, Chris Sarandon, who played Mike, Alex Vincent, who played Andy, of course, and then we have Brad Dourif, who voiced and played Charles Lee Ray and voiced Chucky. Those are the four big ones, and only two of the four have carried on into other movies or even the TV show, essentially. Which the TV show is amazing if you haven't seen it.
So good.
And it was also directed by Tom Holland.
Not the Tom Holland that you know. There's some people out there. Like, really? I was like, he's like 20 something years old. Not that Tom Holland. Everybody relax.
Yeah, I know. No, not the other one. The one that did like Fright Night and stuff like that. And that's another reason why I think Chris Sarandon was part of this project, because he was working on other things with him, and Tom was like, "Hey, you want to come on and do this?" And
he was fantastic in Fright Night. So
oh yeah, for sure,
deserved to be in this.
Yeah. When I talk to a lot of people who grew up in the 80s, I'm a 90s baby, but I love 80s movies. And anybody who grew up in the 80s, or even like in the 70s, and you say Chris Sarandon, they're like, he is amazing. And he is. He's a really, really good actor in anything that he does. And he's still active. He's still out there doing it, man.
Yeah.
And he's actually in the convention that I just missed. I wanted to go and meet him so bad. The Boston Comic Con, because I live in Massachusetts. So
me too.
Oh, you do?
I do.
And of course, this was also written by Don Mancini, who eventually took over, directing and writing pretty much all the other Child's Play movies and TV show. And I cannot wait for the second season. It's gonna be so good. And I will go over to Rotten Tomatoes. Have you looked at the tomato score on this movie at all?
No.
Okay.
I stay away from Rotten Tomatoes as much as I can. I usually get stuff off of like IMDb, so I get like the IMDb score, but I don't even know what it is for this.
It's a 6 point. I just looked at it. 6.6. So it's not bad. 6.6 out of 10 on IMDb. That's not bad. But I will ask you if you want to take a wild guess as to what the critics gave this out of 100.
Ooh. This is gonna be tough. It's like slashers are always hit and miss with critics.
Yep.
I'm gonna say like a 52.
71.
Wow.
It's not certified fresh, but 71. I have a bone to pick though. I like Rotten Tomatoes sometimes, but I have seen movies that were rated like 50 to like 60% certified fresh. But then there's ones like this that are 71 and it's not certified fresh. It makes no sense as to where they're getting that certified fresh like badge or whatever you want to call it for certain movies. It's so weird. But what about the audience score? Want to take a wild guess on that?
Ooh, I'm gonna guess a little higher though than what I guessed before. I'm gonna say it's in like the mid 70s, probably 80. I'll give it an 80.
63.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's like 250,000 reviews too. So it got a lot of reviews. Let me see. Trying to see if they give me a budget. Sometimes IMDb has budgets, but then also sometimes they don't. Um, that's another thing that's always really weird. But every time we go and look for things like that, sometimes Rotten Tomato has it. Oh, the budget for this apparently was $9 million. Okay, that's pretty hefty for the '80s. 9 million.
Yeah.
Um, it grossed. Opening weekend was about almost 7 million, so almost made its money back on opening weekend. Um, Worldwide was 44 million, so it definitely has recouped its budget and other things along the way.
Yeah.
And I always like seeing that for films, and it's also really hard to gauge too because all like the physical media that's out there, the different releases for the films, they don't really like tally that stuff in. You'd have to do your own research, and I ain't got time for that to go and research how much did it make just with DVD sales or whatever
Oh
it
yeah.
may be.
It made enough money. I mean, look at how many movies this franchise has produced. I mean, clearly it's been successful. I mean, I know that it got to the point with um the later films, I think after Seed of Chucky, when that one didn't perform very well, so Curse and Cult of Chucky were straight to DVD.
Yeah, I remember watching both of those on Netflix. I believe I think they were being released straight to DVD, and I think they were partnered with Netflix at the time. I could be wrong about that.
think
It's been a while.
I think Cult of Chucky, they did that because I remember watching it on Netflix as well. Because I actually bought Curse of Chucky the day it came out on Blu-ray. Because as being a huge Chucky fan, I had to watch it. But yeah, I do remember Cult of Chucky. I think was like straight to Netflix.
Yeah, that's a weird one. If you want a weird Child's Play movie, that's the one to go to. Even though they were really trying to bring it back to its roots, but one way that I've been thinking about the Cult of Chucky is it was a setup for the TV show. Is how I look at it. Because when
Yeah.
it first came out, you were just like, "What did I just watch?" But now with the TV show and it also having like the Cult of Chucky parts of it, like all the millions of other Chuckies everywhere, it makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
But at the time, you were just like, cool, I guess that there's the other personalities and different Chuckies everywhere now.
Yeah. It was a good setup.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Kurt, the thing is like I when Seed of Chucky initially came out, I didn't like it. I was like, it was so far out there. I was like, I like Bride of Chucky and I like the humor that they brought into the franchise and it was just kind of zany. Uh, and Seed just went a little too far for me initially, but going back and rewatching it, you know, but when Curse of Chucky was announced and they were like, it's going to feel like Child's Play again. And that got me super excited because, Child's Play of the entire franchise, like Child's Play 1 through 3, they're, I mean, a lot of people they'll say a lot of things about 3, but I love the original Child's Play movies, like the
Oh,
original,
same.
I call it the Child's Play trilogy because they went away from the name after 3 because it went to a different studio, so they couldn't use Child's Play anymore. That's why it's called Bride of Chucky and all that. But I love those 3 movies.
Yeah, me too. They're very fun, and just the kills just got amped every single time.
Yes.
And also the kill count got amped up. And then when you get to like Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky, it just goes. It's crazy. I love all of the movies. They're all wacky and they all have their own personalities. And people prefer Bride over a lot of the other ones, which I can understand because that was like more of, I guess you can say, the mainstream one. They were really trying to appeal to almost all the audiences that they possibly could.
Mhm.
And that they were really going for, this is Chucky now. Like, it's just Chucky. Don't worry about anybody else. They focused mainly
Yep.
on building his personality, and then adding all the other characters like Tiffany and everything. It really started adding a lot more to where this franchise could go, and they were doing that, and then they went back to the basics, sort of. and that, but they still kept, like Tiffany and all the other characters, and Andy's back. But a lot of people were really excited when they were like, yeah, Andy's back in Child's Play now, or whatever you want to call it. And it really, started bringing even more of an audience to it, because you got all the younger kids who are now watching it from like the younger generations because of the TV show. So it's like, it's just every like 10 years, it's just getting a whole new revival, is how I feel with this franchise. It's always
Oh yeah,
trying to be fresh. And that's all because of Don. Don is
yeah.
he's ahead of the curve. He knows what he's doing. He's got great people on his side. He's got a great cast of everybody, and he keeps them all frequent, and does a really good job. And thank you to him for putting a lot of voices with other communities as well into all the Child's Play movies, because he's a very diverse person, and I appreciate that a lot.
Oh yeah. Don is the Don is the king of this franchise. I mean, it's his baby. So, and you can just see the care he has anytime you watch any behind the scenes or you watch any interviews with him. He cares so much about this franchise. And yeah, even though he's admitted to the zaniness and the wackiness that came with Bride and Seed, but he's able to turn it around. And when he putting out Curse and Cult, which are completely different from the last two before it, but and people are still there for the ride.
Oh yeah, exactly. And
Like,
I
the amount
guess
of people
without
who are excited for the show is just great.
oh yeah, I think with the second season, I think comes out, it's October, I
Over.
believe. I think originally they were trying to shoot for early September, but I think they said October now. So I'm
Mhm.
excited, and I hope it's longer than season one. I hope there's more episodes. Um, I don't know. Just bring me anything at this point, because the show just goes in so many different directions.
Yep.
It's nuts. But I guess without further ado, we can jump right into the 1988 Child's Play. And Brett, as you are the guest on our show, I will have you kick it off. I guess the best way to kind of go about this that I've been doing lately is just picking scenes that maybe stand out to you, or something that you want to talk about. Because this is another movie that has a lot going on when you don't think about it, but there is, and a lot of different themes being played around with. So I'll
Right.
let you take the floor, and you can start us off, man.
So, I mean, the opening scene is great. You get to see the origin of Chucky. You see Charles Lee Ray running away from the cops. You don't really know exactly who this guy is ultimately. He's being chased by Mike Norris, played by Chris Sarandon. And for just a little side trivia about Chris Sarandon. So Susan Sarandon, the reason that she is Susan Sarandon is because of Chris Sarandon. Weird little fact that I thought I should
Yeah,
throw out there, because they were married back in like the 70s and she just kept the name. Weird thing I found out.
yeah.
But so yeah, so he's this whole scene is great. I love the chase scene. I love him getting shot, and then him, Eddie leaves him, and he like is all frazzled now. He goes into the toy store, and this watching this recently, I've seen this movie a lot throughout my life. But it always makes me laugh when Mike is looking like so. Uh, Charles is shot and he's bleeding out. He's trying to find something. You don't know what he's really going to be doing, and he then crashes into a bunch of good guy dolls, and then he looks at one. He's like, "Oh, okay," and you're like, "Oh, okay." Like, if just I'm telling this as like somebody who's never seen this movie, and you're going into this like, what is he about to do? But Mike is the worst person. Like, this toy store can't be that big. How long does it really take for him to locate him? He never actually locates him.
No, no.
Because by the time he like figures out like the direction to go in, everything happens. So Charles uses voodoo magic pretty much to transfer his soul, yes, into a doll. It's called a good guy doll. It was based on the My Buddy doll, which came out in the 80s and 90s, which I had one, which is no longer with us as my wife threw him away.
Oh
But it's
no.
a long story. But but yeah, he transfers his soul into this doll, and then it causes like a storm cloud overhead, which then blows up the toy store. But it just made me laugh out loud when I watched it a couple days ago, just to kind of refresh myself for this show. It's like Mike didn't look; he just stood in one spot and just was like, "Where'd you go, Charles? Where'd you
Yeah,
go?" And
exactly.
everything happens. I just love that whole opening scene, though. I love the, he's got that the voodoo chant that he uses to transfer his soul and everything. And then it immediately switches to we meet our child protagonist, Andy Barkley, played by Alex Vincent, who is, there's child actors are always hit and miss. And I believe when this was filmed, he was like 6 or 7 years
Yeah.
old, which I think
Yep.
his character's 6. And I feel he did a really good job um,
Oh,
with the situations he's put in this movie.
for sure. Like it makes you feel so sad because like his tone of voice in certain parts, it makes you so sad. And obviously as both of us being parents, like it's heartbreaking to
Mhm.
see a child like trying to convey some sort of emotion that's distressing, and like something happening,
Mhm.
and and you see the mother just like being like, you're just a kid, you don't know anything, like you're just making this up, blah blah blah. And that always makes me really really sad because his tone too, it's so sweet and
Right.
innocent, and like I don't think they could have picked anybody else to do this role. Because if you're trying to pull at some heartstrings of like really feeling for Andy when things start going really really haywire, um yeah, I don't think anybody else could be picked. You might have to like throw a few names at me, maybe. But I think at that time there really wasn't that many big childhood actors. Where I mean, like there was Drew Barrymore, but he was probably already like almost a teenager. I'm trying to think, when the hell did Firestarter come
Um,
out? You know,
Firestarter came out in '84.
yeah, I
I
think she
think
was
she
already like
was,
9 or 10 at that point.
yeah, so she would have been preteen, teenager, probably. Which they did with the remake of Child's Play. They made Andy a lot older. They made
Yeah.
him middle school age. Um, but we don't need to go too far into that.
No, no, I was just gonna say we can just
No.
leave that one right there.
Yeah, but yeah, he does a great job with it. I mean, to be honest, all the performances are great, but it's one of those things where it's, you know that, I mean, us as parents living in the time we are now compared to, parents in the '80s and '90s, even early 2000s, like this is probably a normal occurrence. Like something tragic happens, the Aunt Maggie, who she is the most tragic death in this entire film,
I agree.
because I like this. Her character is really like genuine and like realistic, and when she dies, you're just like, oh, that's the, like, it's the best way to start when it comes to the kills of this movie, but it's really sad because she's a likable character. She stands up to that really terrible boss. I
Yeah.
don't know how much I can swear here, but
No,
he's
you non-censored. Anything you want to say.
the boss sucks.
Yeah.
And she stands up to him, and then of course she helps him, Karen, get the doll, because she, they're tight on money, so they're trying to find a way to, she wants to make Andy happy. It's his birthday,
Yeah.
and Maggie helps her by finding a guy who's got the doll. So like she's a very likable character, and then she gets killed, and you're just like, oh, that really sucks. Even
Yeah.
when you, like, every time you watch it, it still hits you the same way. But it's one of those things where like a 6-year-old kid is telling his parents or his mom that his doll is alive, and you're just like, any
Yeah,
rational
okay.
person would be like,
Whatever.
okay. It's one of those things where like nowadays you're just like, you just got to go with it, kind of. You're like, oh, okay, tell me more. Like you kind of get
Yeah.
in that situation until you find out that the doll's actually alive, and then you're like, oh. But
Well, yeah.
it's one of those things where I feel the reactions to Andy coming and saying like Chucky's alive, it's very genuine, because it's like Karen goes through a very traumatic experience with Maggie dying, and then of course like her son is being blamed, is
Yeah.
being blamed but not being blamed, because they don't actually come out and say like we think it's Andy. Like it's just
It's
like,
hinted hard though,
oh yeah,
like really really hard, and it's really really sad. And
yeah.
like, talking about Maggie too, like I love Maggie, and I've listened to like other podcasts or I've read other reviews, and nobody touches on Maggie. I don't know why. Like,
Hmm.
there's no love for Maggie anywhere. The only thing that I have read is like, oh well, Maggie is an asshole. She does not care about Andy. She was just like throwing the doll around and telling him to go to bed. Like this lady is like there all the time, helping Karen watch Andy. It's highly implied that she's babysitting him a lot.
Yeah.
When because she has to work a lot because of the asshole boss. But
So,
like we need more love for Maggie. Come on, guys. Come
yeah.
on.
Clearly people who say that aren't really watching it too much, because like when you see like, yeah, she gets a little, it's one of those things where it's like, you're telling your kid that he needs to get ready for bed, or tell your kid to do something, and they're kind of just like finding any which way not to do it.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
you're just like, all right, well, now you got to get a little bit more stern. And that's all she was doing. And I feel people just think that it's, oh, that's so aggressive. Like she was being really mean to him. It's just like,
No.
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 Like like the whole thing where Chucky whispers into Andy's ear about watching the news. And she's just like, yeah, nah, it's time for bed.
Yeah.
And then the
Exactly.
TV turns on and she thinks it's Andy, because that's like the most rational thing. Like, the first thing in my head is not gonna be like, oh, that doll's alive and came into the kitchen and turned on the TV. Like, no, you're gonna think the kid came out, put Chucky in front of the TV, and then turned it on. And so yeah, she gets a little uppity, and she goes in there and is a little bit aggressive, but like it's a natural thing for a
Exactly.
parent to do. She gets and she's just like, she puts him to bed. You can tell she cares for him.
Yeah.
Like, she messes with him. Like when she's about to walk out the door, she kind of does the little quick, like, I'm watching you type thing, but she knows, like, it's all, it's just, I feel it's just a genuine relationship between, the babysitter. I mean, he calls her Aunt Maggie. I don't think she's actually Karen's sister. I don't know if she's actually related, but it's implied that she's around a lot, like you said.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to show more love for Maggie. I agree.
Exactly. I'm gonna start a petition right now. Bring
I'm just
Maggie
gonna get a
back
shirt.
from the
It's gonna be
dead.
Maggie.
We'll get her into a doll so we can have her in a TV show. How about
Yeah.
that?
Her death though is pretty crazy. If you think about it, Chucky's the one who kills her, and he's got to be really strong to push her from where she was standing in that kitchen to then so much force that she smashes through this window. Like that window, not very strong.
Yeah.
And
It's funny too because I was on another podcast, House That Screams horror podcast, and we were covering Child's Play, and I was even asking that. I was like, how did she just like go flying out of the window?
yeah,
And everybody was like, oh, she was just really really startled and was backing up and just went back. No, if you watch that footage, she was like pushed out. There's no
she
way
gets
she
hit in the
just
head with the
tripped.
hammer. That's technically what he does to her, because
Yeah,
it shows you the hammer hitting her head, and yeah.
yeah,
But yeah,
but
it's very dramatic.
like wow, like he is really really strong. He's a obviously a doll, but he has to have still the strength of a full sized man.
Yeah.
That's the only way that would make any kind of sense, unless you're gonna go and be like he's got voodoo strength, like it's just extra strength, and he's a superhero now or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really really rough scene. And the suspense too on like all these scenes, especially later on with when Karen gets the reveal. We'll get to it, but like the reveal of Chucky, the suspense throughout the whole sequence is really good. And there's a lot of that in this movie. It's very tense. That's the best way to
Yeah.
really describe it. It's a very tense movie, and you never know what's gonna happen. You're always waiting for Chucky to eventually kill Andy, which he's trying to do, but he was also trying not to. Like he wants him to move his body into Andy, and I
Right.
guess it would just be reversing soul. So he'd be in the doll, or
Yeah.
something like that. I never really understood the whole like, okay, you get into his body, but where does Andy's soul go? Is it still there?
I
Does
think
it
it's like
get?
either in limbo or it's taken over.
Yeah,
Like
it's
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 just not
it's
Andy
weird.
anymore.
It's a crazy concept, and I mean, it is voodoo, and there's a lot of different variations of
Yeah.
voodoo in the real world that people do. Especially in Haiti, they're very voodoo central over there with a lot of their rituals and stuff that they do in the communities, which is it's cool. But the voodoo used in this is mainly well, how Chucky uses it is for evil doing essentially.
Right.
To better himself is like the whole thing is what he's trying to do. He wants to be immortal, which I mean, yeah, I mean, in a way, we all kind of want to be like that. But when you really think about it, at the end of the day, do you really want to be immortal, living to like 1,000 years and aging and literally dust? I don't think so.
I mean, Charles' whole idea behind it is just to his because he knows he's going to die. He escapes, puts his soul into the doll. But when his initial thought process when he does it is that he can't be hurt. He's a doll now. Like
Yeah, exactly.
he can't die. But then once things start happening and he's getting actually hurt, and then because the whole point is he's just going to use Andy as a vessel to be blamed for the things that he is doing, and then probably eventually kill Andy. But then when he finds out later on that, oh, the longer you're in the body, the more human you become. So it's like, well, now the plans have changed. Now I have to transfer my soul. And then that's when the franchise, and then that's kind of the whole point of the franchise going forward
Yeah,
until
cat and mouse.
later on when he just kind of stops caring about
Yeah,
that whole thing.
yeah.
But I do want to go back though to the very when we first meet Andy, and he's making probably the most nutritious breakfast
Oh yeah, the sugar on
ever.
sugar on sugar
Oh my
cereal.
lord!
Oh,
And
it's
that
so good.
pound of butter he puts on that really burnt toast, and then brings it to his.
It's so
It's,
cute
it's
though.
awesome. Yeah,
It's
it
like
is.
that's like for sure that's something that my son would do. Like if I said like if he wanted to, because it's his birthday, so he's trying to obviously
Yeah.
impress his mom and be like, hey, I'm doing all those things for you. Can I get a cool toy now? Because even
Mhm.
on the TV, he's watching the cartoon and the guy in the suit. That's always creeped me out so much more than the actual doll itself. Is the guy in the buddy um suit
In the
is
yeah,
it's so creepy. And I'm surprised no one's actually cosplayed as that. It's always just Chucky. We need that full size
we need
one of
somebody to get
those.
that costume. Somebody find Don Mancini, see if you can locate that costume.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, when Andy delivers the breakfast, it's so cute and
Yeah,
it's good
it's just
intentions.
the thought
It's a
that
kid.
counts. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'll drink the orange juice.
Yeah.
I just
Everything
love that she's
else.
like, I'll have it later.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And then he actually has gifts for his birthday, but it turns out not to be anything that he wanted. It's clothes, and it's just an accessory kit for the doll. So
For
it's
the
like cool. You can use that, but kind of need the doll for most of that stuff. But it's the thought that counts when you're a parent. Like you can only do so much because he's working usually a 9 to 5, but it seems like it's like a 9 to like midnight. She's working literally all day. Gets up and already at it, and obviously the asshole boss that we were talking about. And she goes and finds the actual doll because there's a peddler in the back, and she buys it for like I think $30. I think that's how much
$50.
she spends. Like I don't even
Maggie
care.
tries to Maggie tries to talk him down, but Karen just doesn't care. She just wants the doll, so she
Yeah,
pays $50 for him.
I mean, when you're that desperate and you really want to make your child happy, I mean, I'd probably do the same thing. Like, yeah, it may not be the best. It's kind of like the Jingle All the Way version as well when he goes to the Santa Clauses and
Yeah,
and he gets the Turbo Man. So it's like same thing right there. Like you're trying to do anything that you possibly can to make your child happy. Um, because I mean they don't care about money or anything like that. They want this one toy, and that's what's gonna make them happy. So she does everything she can. She brings it home, and guess what? He's happy, and then
hmm
things start happening. uh,
so yeah, we get Maggie's death,
yeah, like
which is
right
tragic.
away too. Like there's like
Yeah,
no time between. A little bit, but it picks up very very quickly. Uh, trying to think if there's like a scene in that, because there's a lot of really cool moments that happen up to when Maggie is eventually killed. Um, is I've always really liked the running behind and the shadows that they use before like it's actually revealed that it's Chucky. I think that's probably like my favorite like image out of that whole thing, and probably the POV running on the countertop is really really cool too. But all like
Yeah.
the use of shadows and the feet noises that they use too, because it's very loud and clanky.
Yep.
I love that so much. It's so good.
It's always good to I've always been a huge fan. I mean, being, a huge Jaws fan, I always liked the fact of like not seeing the creature or the killer, for a bit. You get like, the shadows or the sounds, and something's there, but you don't know exactly what it looks like. I mean, you get an idea of, that what Chucky's gonna look like because of the first scene of the movie, but
Yeah,
you don't get the full look of him not until like way later into the movie.
yeah.
And,
It takes a
and
while.
Andy is taken in pretty much because everything is all first person anytime it's Chucky running around the apartment, or when he goes to Eddie Caputo's and he goes into the house and you only see like his hand or his feet, but you don't actually see his face or anything, which I was always a fan of. I think that's why I like this movie more than I like the sequels, because you already have that established character. Child's Play 2 is pretty close to being on par with this one. I like this
Oh
one a
yeah,
little bit more because it's the beginning and it's just a really well made movie. But Child's Play 2 is fantastic sequel.
yeah.
But yeah,
I agree.
just the fact that everything is in shadow or hidden, I'm a fan of that.
And they build on the suspense, like I was saying earlier, like almost immediately throughout the whole scene, and then the eventual death, and then we get all the cops, and we get introduced to Mike, and then that's when they start thinking like, well, it's probably Andy, because Andy comes and actually runs up to him and it's like, hey, I know who was on the countertop. It was Chucky, because the imprints on his shoes was what was on the counter, and then Andy looked on the bottom and they all had flour on them. But they looked
Yeah.
at him like he was crazy, and they were just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think so. No, and
Yep.
and that's also really sad. Doubting your child with a very like tragic event. I mean, I don't think Karen would ever think Andy did it. There's a point in the movie where she almost does. Is when she starts like really losing it with him, and it like starts shaking him. It's like, you need to tell them the truth, Andy. Is when
Yeah.
they're at the station like later on, before he gets essentially admitted to a psych ward for a child. Like that's so
Yeah.
messed up too.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to admit you, it's just like, what the hell, man? Like, it's just he's a 6-year-old kid who has a very broad imagination, which they all do, because their minds are always going. I mean,
Yep.
it's nuts, man.
Yeah. That is it's ridiculous. The whole thing. I mean, the fact that Andy leaves school with Chucky and
Yeah,
then
that's
rides a
nuts
train
too.
and no one questions this. Like no one's like, "Hey,
Exactly.
where's
Oh,
your mom, little boy? Like, why are you by yourself going on a subway train in Chicago, going to a really, really bad neighborhood?"
yep.
Um, yeah, no one questions it. They just let him go. And then, the whole thing with Eddie happens where Chucky, you know, pretty much booby traps the place and then blows it up.
Yeah.
And, how far was Andy from the house when it blows up, by the way? Because he was right there about 5 seconds before it happens, and then he's fine. He's
Yeah, I love what he says to Chucky. He says, "Chucky, stay there. I'm gonna go tinkle." And it's just like, it's just lines like that are so innocent and funny, and
yeah,
you just feel for Andy the whole time. And he's such a great comic relief without really being a comic relief. He's just being
yeah,
a kid, but it's just so funny. But yeah, I don't think he was that far, because it was like a junkyard sort of over there with a bunch of this random shit. So he had to have been maybe 50 feet away, maybe. So he was pretty close, regardless, because that was a big boom. Um,
Yeah.
the whole gas was on, and he shot it, and Chucky got out of there really, really fast. I do have to say that he bolted.
Mhm.
And that's another really good scene, used with suspense and shadows and POVs is really, really good. Great job, on everybody who was working on this film. Masterclass, I have to say. And it set a lot of standards for movies to come, for sure. And also set a lot of standards and ways for them to, kind of up the ante in later films like Child's Play 2. They definitely upped the ante in a lot of shots and stuff that they use there, and use of lighting as well, and the whole factory scene at the very end is just nuts too,
Yeah.
of the second movie.
Also, the design of Chucky as well, it just evolves. I know the Chucky design they use in the show is very similar to the one they use in Child's Play 2 because
Yeah,
they kind of smoothed them over a little bit. I love the design of Chucky in this movie because it is the OG, and I like uh, I just like the aesthetics.
yeah,
Um, so Kevin Yeager is the one who created Chucky. Well, he helped design him. Don Mancini, of course, helped as well. But he's actually married to Catherine Hicks, who plays Karen.
yeah,
So,
yep, that's right. Yeah,
that
that's
makes
always a fun fact that I forget, but when people say it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, that's right.
yeah.
There's a lot of intertwining in this movie too, of people knowing other people. Tom
Yeah.
Holland just knows everybody in the industry too, so
Yeah.
and he's made a lot of really, really good movies. And I think he's still active. I know he's at a lot of conventions, but I think he's still, maybe not directing, but I think he's writing. I think I could be wrong about that, but a lot of people are still very active in the in movies, which is good. I like keeping old things alive and then passing them on to another generation, and that's kind of like what the show is doing right now. Is like they're keeping something that was old alive, but passing it on to a whole new generation to kind of keep it going. And I'm like keep saying, I'm very, very excited for season 2. I really want to see how batshit it's gonna go, and just really see what happened to Andy. For anybody who hasn't seen the show, what happened to him, because we didn't really
Yeah.
get an answer. So
Yeah. It's very good.
it is. Let's see, what's the next big thing that really happens? Is after the
We get the
boom.
reveal.
What's that?
Well, Andy gets brought into the police
Yeah,
station.
the police station. Yep.
Yeah, this is when you talked about it a little earlier about what Karen is just like she's just so besides herself. She's just like, you need to tell
Yeah.
him the truth. Like you need to tell him the truth. Like what's going and Andy he's so determined to get Chucky to talk, and Chucky doesn't.
Yeah.
He's a doll. Like he just acts like a doll. So he doesn't. There's no reaction to it. So of course, a doctor is watching it, and he's like, "Well, we think it's a good idea to. We should just hold Andy here for a couple days for some observation." It's just like I'd be like, "No, we're not going to do that at all." And it's like, "Well, your son's been been at the scene of 2 murders." I'm like, "He's 6 years old. What do
Yeah.
you mean? Why would he go? Why would a 6-year-old kid who didn't know this Eddie Caputo? Why would he go to his house and just blow it up? It doesn't make sense.
And
There's got to be something else going on here."
like if I'm trying to get into the mind of Karen right here too, what the hell? Like, why would my son be over there next to a exploded building with somebody he doesn't even know? But you
Right.
you should be putting 2 and 2 together with Andy already saying that Chucky's alive. How else would he get this information? To know
Yeah.
where Eddie is, or even know who Charles Lee Ray is, because he says
Yeah.
that too, and she's just like, who? But and then like,
Right.
Mike is like, what? Like he's dead, and then they got the whole conversation later on between him and Karen. But yeah, like I would be very, very worried as the parent for Andy,
Yeah.
and that's probably why she is so short with him, on top of everything else that's going on. But like not knowing like why were you there, like you could have died and whatnot. So that's another reason why I think she was okay with signing off with him being there for a couple of days, to kind of maybe keep him away from anything else that would happen on the outside That's my way of kind of
Yeah.
justifying it in some sort of way for him to be there. But it's also really shitty having to put your son in a psych ward for a couple of days.
Years old. Like
Yeah,
it's
nuts.
crazy. Like
And,
you just like, I don't know what's happening. I'm just, my doll's talking to me. Like I don't know what else to tell you.
yeah. Then this is when Karen eventually starts doing her own little investigation, and
Yeah.
then we get the great reveal and suspense scene of the batteries falling out of the package,
It's such a great reveal.
and it's so good. Hi, I'm Chucky. Want to play? And she drops like the doll and runs off, and all these
Yeah.
other things. And he runs over to Chucky leaves, and he goes into the elevator with the. Or is that later on with the older?
She discovers that the batteries aren't in Chucky. She checks him, and when she opens the back, he turns his head and does
Yeah.
the "Hi, I'm Chucky." And she drops him, and then she pulls him back out again, and she starts to taunt him. She's like, "You need to talk to me, you son of a bitch. Tell me," and then he doesn't react until she turns on the fireplace.
That's right. That's
If you
right.
don't
Yeah.
say anything, I'm gonna throw you in the fire. And he's like, "You bitch," and just
Yeah.
attacks her.
Calls her a
Great.
slut and everything. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and he bites her, and
Oh,
she
yep.
bites him, and then that's when he runs out the door, and then she tries to catch up with him as he's taking the elevator out.
Yeah, and then I think she tries to go approach Mike, and Mike's like, "Yeah, okay." Like she has the bite in the batteries, but she's still just like, well, he's like, "Yeah, I don't buy it at all."
Yeah.
But she's like, "Okay, whatever. I want to go find this peddler," and he's like, "No, don't. Like that's a really bad part of town. It's at that night." So he runs off and eventually goes there, and then they try to kind of have her way with her. It's very very heavily implied that's what's gonna happen. And then good guy Mike shows up with the gun and then gets the
Yep.
answer.
Like, oh, he's a cop, and they all scramble.
Yeah. Yep.
But it just as I like Chris Sarandon, and Mike is kind of dumb.
Yeah, yes,
Like
he
he's probably
is.
the dumbest character in this movie, because Andy's talking about Charles Lee Ray. And it's like, how would this 6-year-old know anything about Charles Lee Ray? It's like, oh, he's probably watched the news. So it's like, okay, that could be a possibility.
Yeah.
But the fact of like, he finds Charles Lee Ray near Good Guy Dolls, which is the doll that Andy is saying is alive, and his name is Chucky. So it's like, I'm not expecting to immediately be like, oh, I believe him.
Yeah.
When Karen goes up to him and explains everything that's happening, and then they go to the peddler, and the peddler tells Mike where he got the doll on the burned out toy store. And he's like, oh, the place I shot Charles Lee Ray, next to those good guys. Like, that's when like he should have been. I feel like he's just trying to be like, this is absolutely crazy. I can't believe this. This is nuts. And like Karen's pushing him, and he's just like, get away from me. Get away from me. I need to clear my head and figure things out.
Yeah.
And then, he goes, gets the file on Charles Lee Ray, and then drives back and gets attacked by him.
Yeah, that's a great scene in the car with him, like almost like stabbing his nuts and everything. Oh my god,
it's great.
Just open up the door and roll out, dude. Just let your car go.
Yeah.
Just let your car go. Whatever. That's really really good. Very very tense, and then the car does eventually flip over or something like that, right?
Yeah, it does flip.
Yeah.
But at first he does the lighter that's inside the car.
Yeah, and burns his head. Yeah,
he burns Chucky's cheek, which is, I like how they keep that throughout the rest of the movie. But yeah, the car flips, and then Chucky taunts him. He kind of like circles around the car, and Mike is trying to shoot him and stuff until Chucky just leaves. Or no, Chucky gets shot.
Yeah,
and then looks down and notices he's bleeding. He's like, well, that ain't good.
Yeah,
and then he's gone.
Yeah, and then they kind of get that lead of like the voodoo guy that he used to go and see, and then we get Chucky visiting his pal, and eventually kills him and gets the whole spiel of like, yeah, the longer you're in this body, the more human it's gonna be, so you need to transfer your body out into something else before it's too late. And then he's like, yeah, whatever. And then he's like, but it has to be the first person that you revealed yourself to. And he's like, God damn it. Like, I have to go and do it to this kid? Are you kidding me? And then that's the greatest part.
The whole scene between John and Chucky Chucky revealing himself.
Hello, John.
Yeah, like, it's me, Chucky. And he talks about, he's like, I did this spell. I thought I was untouchable until I got shot and and it hurt like hell. And he's like, well, the longer you're in that body, the more human you become. And then it's the whole thing of like, Chucky's like, you need to help me get out of this. And he's like, no, you're a
No,
terrible person. You're using this for evil. And that's not why I taught you what I
yeah.
taught you. And Chucky's like, well, all right. So he finds a voodoo doll of John. It's like, John, why are you making a voodoo doll yourself?
And
And
why are
why
you
do
showing
you know where
people?
it is?
Like, why are you showing
And he
people where
says
it
it
is?
too.
Because
He's like,
he comments on that. It's like, you shouldn't
yeah,
be telling people where your stuff is, John. Like, what the? This guy is just dumb. He has too much faith in humanity and trust.
yeah. And yeah, he snaps John's arm and leg, and then he stabs him, and that's when we get the really it's a really eerie line, but it's iconic where he's like, well, I gotta go, John. I got a date with a 6-year-old boy. And
Yeah.
we're like, that's creepy as hell. And then he leaves.
Yep.
And
And
then
then
Karen and Mike find him bleeding on the ground, and then he dies.
yeah, and they get the saying of like, you got to get him in the heart, to kill him in the heart.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then the next suspenseful scene that's really sad is the whole Andy in the psych ward with
Yeah.
Chucky coming up the stairs, and you're just like, oh
It's
my god, like this,
terrifying.
hurry up, guys, help him.
Crying. He's pounding on the door. He's like, get me out of here. And then he's like crying. He's like, he's coming to get me. He's coming to
Yeah,
get, like, he is
so sad.
genuine fear. And like, that's why I think Alex Vincent did a fantastic job in this movie. Just to like that whole scene, you're like, oh my God, you feel for this kid
Yeah,
as he's watching his doll just climbing up the stairs to get to him. But he's a smart kid too.
yeah, he made it so he could get himself out. I mean, he obviously hid, and then was able to get the doctor to get him out to kind of sedate him and whatnot, and that brings the whole reveal of Chucky going over there and then zapping his brains and everything. And that's a really gruesome kill compared to all the other ones because of the shocking and then the blood coming out of the eyes and the mouth. That one's really gnarly.
Backing up. He's like, stop. And then like as it continues, like he's trying to say stop more, but like it's so hard for him to get the word out.
Yeah.
And Chucky's just sitting there, just smiling the whole time as it's happening. It's a good but scary scene.
Yeah. And then Andy manages to find his way home too, which is pretty smart of him as well. He gets there and locks Chucky out as best as he could anyway. And he puts up a kind of an okay fight until the other two show up, or actually I think it's the mom first. I think it's Karen who runs home first, and Mike comes later if I remember correctly.
I think no, Mike and Karen are together the whole time. So Andy fights his way or tries to fight his way, but unfortunately Chucky gets the upper hand, knocks him out.
Yeah.
And then starts to do the
chant, yeah.
The chant, and then Karen and Mike bust through the door.
Okay.
Karen kind of like kicks Chucky across the room.
Yeah, I didn't really watch this one because I have a very good memory of this film, but I always get mixed up at the end if it's just Karen or if it's Mike. So
they're together pretty much from the time that like she runs into him outside the police station when she's telling him about Chucky. They're together the whole way. Well, no, that's not true because Mike was by himself when he gets in the accident. But I think they meet up.
I think she's on her way home, and just in case if Andy gets there, does she go to the hospital first? Actually, does she even go to the hospital?
I think she does because I think that's how she finds out that Andy's not there.
Oh, that's
like,
right.
I gotta go home because that's where he's gonna go.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we get like the really classic line and build up to Chucky essentially being incinerated, and he says to Andy, "Oh, I thought we were friends until the end. This is the end, friend," and burns him. It's so good.
It's my favorite scene of.
It gives me chills. Just
movie.
Thinking about it gives me chills. The way he delivers that line is so good.
It reminds me of the scene in Jurassic Park where they're escaping the raptors and they got to try to get the locks activated for.
Yeah.
Got Ellie and Grant like pushing up against the door, and they're trying to figure. It kind of reminds me of that, other than the fact that like they don't set the raptors on fire. It's so good because he's going ape shit, trying to get out from the fireplace, and then as soon as like he knows it's bad, something bad's gonna happen, and that's when he turns from being psycho to like, oh Andy, I thought we were friends to the end, and then Andy's delivery of that line is awesome. Like it's such a good delivery of that line,
Yeah.
and it gets me every time.
Yeah, same. And then just watching Chucky burn, and you
So
think
good.
it's the end, and it's not. They go to that's right, because Mike is with him because he gets stabbed. That's right, so he's in the
He gets stabbed in
bedroom.
like the calf.
Yeah, so he has to. They have to go tend to him, and then Andy runs into crispy Chucky. I like to call him nice crispy Chucky, just walking with his knife, and then Karen has like the best aim possible. Shoots off the head, an arm, and a leg,
Yep.
and a couple times in the chest. But I guess it wasn't the heart. So they go in there, like, oh, it's all over, and then his Mike's partner comes in, and they try to tell him what happened, and he's still like, yeah, no, I don't believe you at all. And then we get another fake out with Chucky coming back and grabbing him through the vent, and he's like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, he's like, I believe you now, and they're like, yeah, but who's gonna believe me? So just
That's the thing is with the way that this movie ends, is like, what are you supposed to tell people?
You would have
like,
to
hey,
have
guys.
footage of it, the only way.
Which is 1988. It's not. It's so hard to be like, hey guys, so yeah, that thing on the ground, that's a burnt body of a doll, but it's got the soul of a serial killer that I thought it could. Like, it's such a so far out there story that, like, yeah, I mean, as this franchise progressed, like we see in Child's Play 2, like Karen she's put in a psych ward.
Yeah.
Like because she's trying to like Mike. I think Mike Norris isn't even with the police department. Like,
no, yeah,
like
I think
pretty much anyone
retired.
involved was found crazy.
Yeah.
Like they're like, yeah, you're nuts. Like how did all this happen? Like, and so it kind of just plays off just the events of this movie ruined so many people's lives.
Yeah,
like
poor Andy.
that were involved in it. Yeah,
like he went through so much compared to all the rest of them. And not to say they didn't go through a lot, they did. But with him being there and being manipulated and used the whole time and building this almost symbiotic relationship with Chucky in a way, because like he's trying to use him and whatnot and all this other stuff. Yeah, it's really sad. And I know the reason why they had to write all this stuff is because obviously they probably didn't want to do the next movie or whatever it may have been. So they had to write something, and that was the smartest way they did it. But without getting Mike and Catherine Hicks back is to write that in and be like, yeah, they were just deemed insane. Essentially, and Andy's trying to survive.
Right.
Like they probably could have ended right at the end of this movie and just left it as it is, as a one-off. But with them adding more to it, I think made the story of Chucky and Andy way better. Because there's a lot that happened in here, but you want to know what happened to this kid growing up. Was he messed up? Did he have to go to an insane asylum or whatever happened? No, it turns out Andy was fine, and he just just lives with other families, and his mother's the one that went insane, which I thought would be the other way around, but I'm not the writer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great movie. This is an amazing movie, and if anybody hasn't seen Child's Play, like, you're definitely living under a rock. Even if you're not a fan of horror, this has everything in it. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but it's good. They handle all the elements really, really well. And I enjoy it every time I watch it. I never get sick of it.
Oh yeah, I watched it again a couple days ago. It still hits the same as it did when I was a kid. Yeah, but if you want to watch Child's, make sure you watch the 1988 Child's Play.
Yeah,
19 Child's Play is a movie that a lot of hardcore Chucky fans kind of dismiss because, for one, Brad Dourif isn't the voice of Chucky. It's not the same design, but it's the same character names.
Yeah,
that's literally the only similarities, and like the fact that he gets a it's a weird movie. I wouldn't say it's terrible. I'd
No.
say watch this one first and then watch the 2019 one and then kind of form your opinion based on that. But this is the superior one.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate what they were trying to do with the,
Yeah.
if you, I don't know if you want to call it a remake or a reboot or whatever it may be, or a different like universe, but them adding like a more modern spin on things,
Right.
it's cool. But yeah, watch the 1988 version
Yeah.
first, because then you're gonna want to watch all of them, and then you can eventually watch that, and then you get
Yeah.
the TV show to watch. So there's a lot of Chucky. There's a
So
lot, and you'll be probably good for a couple of days, depending on how often you can sit down and watch something. But I could probably, if I was off work for like 3 days, I could probably run through everything. And that's all I was doing all day, was just
yeah.
watching Child's Play stuff.
I did a marathon of the entire franchise over this mostly through October last year, and it'll probably happen again soon because it's such a fun franchise. I'm a sucker for. I mean, I love the all those slashers from the '80s.
Same.
Halloween. Being late '70s, but like I love the Halloween movies. Even the ones that people don't like the Thorn trilogy,
Yeah, yes.
6, like, they're not good, but they're still like, I still have a good time watching them. Not as much as, like, the original, like, 1 and 2. 3 is the one that I never really got into just because I was one of those people like, "There's no Michael Myers.
Yeah.
This is dumb." And then I rewatched it recently, and I was like, "Okay, I appreciate it for what they were trying to do," and I know the history behind it, but, like, I love those franchises. Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, um Evil Dead, stuff like that. It's just the '80s were such a great time for horror. I mean, horror is still doing its thing, and it's one of the I think to me is one of the strongest communities and strongest genres right
Yep.
now. 'Cause there's just so much good horror being put out still today. And it's still super underappreciated
Yeah.
genre. Like people just don't show the same appreciation for horror as they do for, you know, like Marvel stuff, like the action and superhero stuff, like that's such a it's so praised, but yet horror, there's so much horror out there that's way, in my eyes, way better than that stuff.
And
Just
it's
doesn't get
funny
the
too,
love.
because people don't realize that a lot of the people who work on the Marvel films, guess what? They worked on a lot of horror films, and there are a lot of classic
Yeah.
people from the '80s who helped with creature designs and stuff.
Hmm.
And it's awesome to hear people like yourself that really do understand that horror as a community is very strong. It's the strongest one out there for sure. I mean, we hold our own. We lift a lot of people up. And we, if there's a bad weed in there, we'll get it out. But I really think that, and I've said this multiple times on this show, that horror right now is in a renaissance. It's really starting to thrive a lot more. It's being popped out a lot. Bigger companies are now starting to really understand that horror makes money, but it also builds communities and get a really strong fan base. I mean, yeah, the companies, the money is the biggest thing to them, obviously.
Right.
But knowing that they have such strong fan bases on certain films, um, and seeing all these other streaming services like Shudder, is designated just to horror, and now the new horror streaming service that's coming out that I'm loving right now is Screambox, is really really cool, which will have Terrifier 2 on there when that's released as an exclusive, and I'm excited. And we actually just talked to the folks that did the Pennywise Story of It documentary, which is also on there as an exclusive, and it's really really good. So there's a lot of horror out there, and not just on those platforms, on Hulu, Netflix,
Oh yeah.
everywhere, man. It you kind of can't get away from it right now, and horror is really in your face, and especially with the way that the world is, especially America right now. I think horror is going to be coming out in a really strong way, and I've talked about this with Dean, my co-host, and a few others. I think horror is going to be in America. It's going to be like the French extremity movement, but America version, really hard hitting shit, and I cannot wait. I can't wait for that,
Love it.
man. I want to
It's
be fucked up.
yeah. I mean, as someone who likes to talk about all forms of film, like not just like I love talking about horror, and we're actually going to be doing a couple horror films in the following weeks. I'm very excited about. And then of course in during October we always talk about horror throughout that entire month because it deserves. I mean, you could talk about horror any time of the year. We've done it before, but we do all sorts of movies. We do talk about the Marvel stuff because I'm a sucker for just I just like watching stuff that's going to entertain me. And
Exactly. Same
I'm
here,
I'm
man.
getting into the
Same here.
fatigue when it comes to superhero stuff. I'm kind of getting fatigued, but I'm still the guy who's just gonna be like, yeah, I'm not feeling it as much, but I'm still gonna watch this movie because I've been invested since they started this crazy train that is the MCU.
Yeah.
But you got stuff like the Batman, which I feel is getting love, but I don't feel it's getting enough love
Oh, it's
because
so good.
it's so
It's
good.
so good.
It's different. It's different than what we've seen. I mean, I think it's close to like what Nolan did with Batman. Um, and it's just I love when they take a character who's so established and they kind of change him up and do different things. But that's the great thing about horror is it's like you have franchises like Child's Play, like Friday the 13th, like Nightmare on Elm Street, but there's so much just individual stuff. Like
Yeah.
there's so much out there that is just uh it's different. Like you watch one horror movie and then another and they're completely different. There's nothing that is similar about those things. And I feel like a lot of action movies they feel very similar. There's just the story's different. You're like, yeah, but
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
horror doesn't feel that way. And I grew up renting horror films as a kid that was probably way too young to watch it, but I didn't, when you had a parent who didn't care, and I appreciated it. I wasn't maybe some of it scared me. I think I probably had some nightmares about Chucky chasing me around when I was a kid after watching Child's Play for the first time. But I just talk about movies is just a great thing, and I'm happy I get to do it and get to do it with somebody like you who has the same passion.
Yeah, well, thank you for, wanting to come on and having this chat. There's a few other things that we can talk about. Is like I do want to get your ranking on this. I have a feeling I know what it's gonna be, but out of 10, what would you rank Child's Play 1988?
So I'm not going to give it a perfect score. I don't know how you want me to rank this out of 10.
Out of 10, you can anything you want to put in.
I'm probably going to give it a 9 out of 10 just because I'm going to take a point away of just how like just dumb these parents like the adults, some of the adults, especially Mike, just dumb. Like I felt like Andy just got treated like shit this entire movie, and I'm going to blame the adults, so they get a point taken away. But other than that, this movie is just is I love the story, I love the performances, and when you have a kid actor of that age who can perform the way that Alex Vincent did in this movie, and then when he goes on and does Child's Play 2, he does a great job there. I gotta praise this movie because there's just a lot of movies that have child actors in it that it just doesn't
No.
do so well. Uh, but yeah, I just love this movie so much. It's probably top 10 for me of all time.
Oh wow.
I watch it every year, probably multiple times a year. It's one of my favorite horror movies. Um, yeah, a 9 out of 10, definitely.
I'm trying to remember what I gave it on the other show because I don't want to give it something that I didn't. But I think I
Gotta
gave
have
it
that
10 out of 10.
continuity.
Yeah, I think it was a 10 out of 10. Just because of how original this is. That's one thing. Like, yeah, I could dock points off for some of the adults being really dumb or something else, but just for how original it was and how ambitious it was at the time, and also for the animatronic and how great it looks. And that's another thing that I always try to do. If there's a higher quality version of an older movie, I like to watch it to see how well special effects can hold up. And this movie, it's seamless. It looks the same no matter what kind of resolution you want to watch it in. It holds up so well. And that's for cinematography and anybody who worked on any of the parts for making Chucky and whatnot and the sets. It's amazing. It's a really good film, and it really breathed, I think, a new life into slashers at the time, because the 80s was filled with slashers.
and sequels, a lot of
Yeah,
slasher sequels. Like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street took over the 80s with, their I mean, especially Friday the 13th, because that started in 1980, and then it
yeah,
just was like a sequel every year for the entire. And then, but you're just like, oh god, we need something new here because
yeah,
we got Nightmare 4 and Friday 6 coming out in the same. It's like
yeah,
this was like that. Oh, something new, sweet. And I think
yeah.
this is the same year Hellraiser came out. I think Hellraiser came out in either
Yeah, it was
80
either 88 or
87.
89, but I think it was 88
Yeah.
if I remember correctly,
Um,
which was also a really hard-hitting movie. That's
right.
another one.
Right, and then we had like the Evil Dead. I think Evil Dead 2 came out in 87.
Yes, yeah.
So it was this was a definitely a breath of fresh air for all those sequels
Yeah.
that they were getting in the 80s. As I'm also I just missed the 80s by like 2 years. So
Oh, I was born in 93, so I missed it by um but yeah, I mean, another thing too, a lot of people don't really categorize this first one as a horror film. They think of it more as like a crime thriller, which I guess you could label it as that too. There is sort of that element, or just a straight up thriller, which there's that too, but it's also terrifying. It's
oh
it,
yeah.
it's definitely a horror film in my eyes. You can categorize it any way you want, and the whole rest of the series is really like embeds it as a horror franchise, not like a thriller franchise. Especially once you get to like Bride and Seed and so on.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm gonna give it 10 out of 10.
There
So
we go.
good rankings, and hopefully everybody else likes the film just as much as us. And if you don't, I'm sorry. Find something else. you know, maybe you like the remake slash reboot better, and if you do, I might have to talk to you on the side. Nothing wrong about liking it. Just I want to know if I would prefer it over the original. But that's just me. And I think that's pretty much all I have for thoughts on this film. Brett, if there's anything that you want to add before we get into closing, go right ahead, man.
I mean, just if you ever want to talk, like if you ever need someone to talk about any movie of this franchise, you know where to find me. I will talk about any movie of this franchise. I actually got Curse of Chucky right here next to me. I
Oh,
was
that's
gonna
awesome.
have a nice little Chucky setup, but I found my Blu-ray for this movie, so there you go. But yeah, this franchise is a lot of fun, and to be able to like, I feel like I haven't talked about a horror movie in a while. We just got through we just recorded for the last Terminator movie yesterday. So I'm just like,
Awesome.
ah, I'm kind of like Terminated out, but like it's nice to talk about something that I have already talked about, but it's just that passion of just like how much I love this movie. Where it's like it's like Jaws. I could talk about Jaws any day of the week. Like I could be on 75 podcasts just talk about Jaws, and that's kind of how I feel about Child's Play. And um, talking about it with somebody who has the same appreciation for it, it just makes it even better. So
Yeah.
thank you for having me on. This has been a blast.
Yeah, it really has been. And for anybody who wants to know, this will be coming out Patreons on Sunday and full release next Monday. So I'll be putting that out. And yeah, it was awesome, Brett, for having you on. And we got to, link up and get us on your show as well. And hopefully next time Dean will be here. He just had prior engagements because he runs his own business, so he's always busy.
Yeah, I know he's got that hot sauce, and I'm like, ooh, I might have to snag some of that.
Yeah, we're trying to get him over here into the U.S. So just keep your eye out, and I'll let everybody know. We're trying to get him into some conventions over here, and I'm gonna
Ooh,
try to help him distribute whatever I can when he comes over. Hopefully, ship some out to some people. So I'll definitely get your name down and get
well,
you on
definitely.
the waiting list for sure.
Yeah, and since we both live in the same state, I mean, at some point we're gonna have to meet each other
Exactly.
face to face.
Yeah, you need to come to the Salem Horror Fest next year in April,
Oh
man. I'll
man,
be there.
I'll have to look into it.
I'll send you a link to it. I'm good friends
The
with
last
the
time I went to
director.
Salem was during Halloween, and it was a mistake
Yeah, I
because that
go
was
every year,
crazy.
off season
But
and on season, and yeah, it's very daunting the first time, but after you're like, yeah, it's really fun to be around with a lot of people and see
yeah,
how how it is in season. So it can be very daunting if it's your first time. I do recommend going on the off season.
Yeah,
Everything.
we did our first time. So I've been there. I've been to Salem twice. It's only like I think 2.5 hours away from me.
Oh, that's not
Uh,
too bad.
the first time it poured the whole day, so it was
Yeah,
actually
that sounds about
nice
right.
because there was nobody there because it was pouring. So it's like, oh, we'll get a little wet, but we were able to go to all like the museums and stuff without a lot of long lines. But then we were like, hey, let's go around, in October. Yeah. Somebody should have told us not to because it was bonkers.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, going on an off season, everything's still open, except
Yeah.
for the haunted houses, and maybe some shops might be down, but everything's still open on the off season. It's great. That's my my home away from home, man, and eventually gonna move there. Hopefully, fingers crossed,
There you
wherever I
go.
want to be. So yeah, definitely, I'll send you a link to the fest, and you can sign up for like the mailing list so you know like when it's gonna be going on. It's gonna, I think, April 20th to something. It's like a full week. Usually they do it in October, but they skipped this year because Kay wanted to make it bigger and wanted to do it on the off season for reasons like you just said, because it's crazy. So
Yeah,
doing it on the
exactly.
off season makes a lot of sense and add a little bit
Right.
more variety throughout the year. So yeah, I'll be there for sure. Trying to get Dean to vendor over there because in the UK he's at conventions all the time. He vendors with his hot sauces there. Like almost every single weekend he's at another convention. Yeah, he does not stop. He is like the
Awesome.
epitome of the working man anywhere. He's doing a podcast, hot sauce, collaborations,
Yeah.
conventions, just everything. And he's another person, if you ever want on any podcast, Dean's always willing to go on and talk about his company or movies. So yeah, that's a little bit of background on Dean and things I'll be doing next year. And Brett, once again, this was awesome. Thank you for coming on, man.
Hey, thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure being here, talking with you because I listen to you all the time. So to be able to talk to you is definitely a good time.
It's always crazy hearing that. Like, yeah, I listened to your show. I'm just like, oh my god, I can't believe you listened to my shitty show over here. Oh man, so thank you for
Well,
the
we actually have
support.
another connection. So
We
who
do?
created your logo?
Barely lethal. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Guess what? He created our logo as well. So we got
yeah,
a little connection there. Barely Lethal, good guy.
he's awesome.
I remember when he was working on all of your stuff for your podcast. So that's kind of how I first found out about you. And then I think we linked up on like Twitter. I think I followed you on Twitter, and then I started listening. I was like, oh, I should probably listen to his podcast. And then
Yeah, yeah,
and
that
then
sounds
now we're
about
here.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
small
pretty cool.
world.
Yeah.
Very, very small world. That's awesome. To hear those stories. Freaking awesome. Yeah, we will definitely link up and figure out what we can do to get on your show, and I would love to have you back on anytime, man. You're
Absolutely.
welcome.
I'm here. Appreciate you.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for listening. That was Child's Play 1988 with Brett from Dissect That Film, and we'll see you guys later. Thank you.